life where with all the circumstances that are going on and going around you, you just felt like you couldn't make a difference. You felt like your life wasn't important and anything you had to say didn't matter. I wonder if you've ever felt like there's a moment you want something more, you need something more, you're looking for something more, and you just feel like just ordinary you, can't make a difference. Well, we're going to talk about what we do when God seems far away and we have all those feelings. Those feelings are a lie, and we're going to dig for 4 weeks into this amazing book in the Older Testament called the Book of Esther. It's one of the books that a lot of people run away from. It's one of the books that we don't know the author. It's the only book in all of the Scripture where God's name's not mentioned. God isn't spoken to. God does no speaking. There is no prayer. There is no worship. There's almost nothing to do with God at all, at least it seems. And in the midst of this book, there's a plot that's put into play to kill all of God's people across the world. And you wonder, where's God in that? What do you do when God seems far away and you feel like you can't make a difference? We're going to see that God raises up some ordinary people to do some extraordinary things. And so we're going to dig through the book of Esther. If you've never read through the book of Esther, it's in our Bibles, it's 10 chapters. It's what we would call 167 verses. It'll take you maybe 20, 30 minutes to read through. If you have a Bible, let me encourage you to go ahead and find it. If you don't have a Bible, there's one provided there for you. Kind of open it up. Right in the middle, there's a book called Psalms, a whole bunch of songs. You go left, there's a book called Job, and then right after it, go left again, and there's a book called Esther. Like I say, a lot of people run away from this because God's name's not even mentioned, and we don't have a sense of what's going on here. And so we're going to dive into this book and understand, but just kind of for the sake of outline for the next 4 weeks, we need to see the book and how it's outlined. And it's really outlined and organized around 3 huge parties. The first one really takes place from chapter 1, and I know technically it kind of ends in chapter 2, verse 7, but I really think chapter 1 through chapter 4 talk to us about this first party. It's the king's party. The king throws a huge party. The second party, which really we'll find in chapters 5 through 7, is Esther's party. And then the third party is just this huge party that the Jewish people institute. It's a new feast. It's a new festival that they institute. It's called Purim. And it's still a celebration that they have today that's an important time that they understand of God's deliverance and God's direction and God's provision for them in ways that even when he doesn't seem like he's close by. And so we're going to dig through that. In fact, 3 weeks from today, on Sunday, November the 1st, where we're going to have a big party. And this Purim party, people that talk about Purim, they say, for the Jewish people, it's like a mixture of our Halloween and Mardi Gras. And people come to synagogue in costumes, and they wear masks, and there's hooping and hollering when the story of Esther is read. And every time one name is read, people boo and hiss, and every time another name is read, people cheer, and the children do these silly little plays to retell the story of Esther, yet it's a story that most of us have maybe heard a sermon on one verse, and that verse is usually kind of taken out of context. And it's a story in the Bible that we try to pretty up, and it's really not a very pretty story. In fact, I've said to all the gatherings today, and if you're watching online, if there are young children present, I'm going to use some pretty graphic language. And so we just want you to be aware of that up front. And so, because this is not a pretty story. And in the midst of it, we wonder, where's God? He seems awful far away. This week, our youngest daughter came home for a few days from fall break, and when the kids come home, there are certain places they want to go and certain things they want to do. And so we're out for a drive, and my wife is driving, and we're just driving, and she's in the left-hand lane getting ready to get over into the center turn lane, and there's a right-hand lane on our side of the road as well, and she's just minding her own business, going the speed limit as she's driving down. We just hear this horn just lay on from behind us, and we don't know what's going on, and this guy gets up to the side of our car, to the window, and I look out, and he says things that I can't repeat in church, and he gives a gesture that I won't gesture in church. And my wife, who doesn't get flustered about much of that kind of thing, is just really flustered, and she doesn't know what happened. What did I do? What went wrong? And it reminded me of a time that I was driving, and the older I get, the crankier I get, and the less patience it seems that I have for certain things. And have you ever had somebody that pulls out in front of you and they really shouldn't have? they just shouldn't have pulled out in front of you, and you get up on them, and they're driving slow, and you can't get around them, and no matter how hard you want to get around them, you just can't. Well, this happened to me, and they pull out in front of me, and they shouldn't have, and I'm there, and I just start to, the only thing that's going to feel good, I'm just going to ride their bumper until I can get around, and I'm not proud of that, and so I do, and I glance down, and on this person's bumper is a Christian bumper sticker, and I despise Christian bumper stickers, but I happen to like this one in the moment because the Christian bumper sticker on the back of this person's car said, "Honk if you love Jesus." And I love Jesus. And I honked because I love Jesus. Because by this all men will know that we're his followers by the sound of our car horns, right? And so I honk, and I feel a little bit better about it, and it just agitated the person in front of me, and they slowed down even more, and I couldn't get around them. And so finally I see my opening, and I start to get around them, and I can't quite get around them, and I look over, and this lady driving the car looked like my grandma. And I'm like, oh my goodness, maybe I misunderstood. So I back off because I can't get around, and I think, what's going on? Maybe, why was I so upset? Why that just wasn't right? And God forgive me, and all these kind of things. And so I finally get to the point where I'm going to finally be able to get around her, and I pull around her. I kid you not, she rolls down her window and she flips me the bird. And I'm like, okay, well, I maybe deserve that. I don't know. And so, but I wonder how many times we do that to God. We're doing things we shouldn't be doing, breaking laws we shouldn't be of his that we shouldn't break, and he pulls up behind us, and we wear some kind of sticker that says we love Jesus. We go to a church, we've been baptized, we pray, we wear some kind of sticker that says, hey, this identifies me as a follower of Jesus, I love Jesus, and so honk if you love Jesus, and he blows the horn to get our attention because he can't do anything else, and when he tries to pass us by, we flip him the spiritual bird. And I see that happening a couple of times in the book of Esther. And so we see a few principles that we're going to see over and over again. Listen for you on your teaching outline. And the first one very simply is this. When God seems far away, we always have to remember that it's not him that moved. It's not him that moved. He says, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. And one of his promises was, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'll be right beside you. We'll see in a little while that he chooses to go ahead of us. He walks alongside of us, and he will come after us. Since God's far away, it's not him that moves. So the question we have to ask when God seems far away is not, where's God? The question we need to ask is, where am I? It's the question that God asked Adam and Eve in the garden. When they're hiding, he said, I showed up like I did every day to walk with you in the cool of the day. I'm here. Where are you? And the question is not, where's God? The question is, where are we? The thing that we struggle with when God seems far away, and we'll see this throughout the book of Esther, is really comes down to one choice, his kingdom or my comfort. Even when he seems far away, am I going to choose him and his ways, or I'm going to do the things that are comfortable for me and the way I want to live life? And then finally, the opportunity that presents itself, even when God seems far away, and we're going to see consistently through the book of Esther, is the opportunity to step up and to speak out. Even when God seems far away and I know the right thing to do, am I going to do it? So let's jump in. You found in the book, in your Bible, the book of Esther. By the way, if you don't have a Bible, I'd love to give you one as a gift today. You can just come down front. We'd love to give you a Bible today if you don't have one. And again, let me encourage you over the next month to read this straight through. Take you 20 or 30 minutes. But I need to spend some time in chapter 1 to set the background. Chapter 1 opens up this way. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, the Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. And the biblical writer, we didn't even know who the writer of this book is. The writer says, I want to give you some historical background, and now all of a sudden here's King Xerxes. You know his kingdom is 127 provinces, and he expects that we enter the story with an understanding. We've lost some of that. So here, just very quickly, 586 BC, the nation of Babylon comes in and destroys Jerusalem. They wipe out Jerusalem. They send all the Jews who are in Jerusalem, they send them off into exile across the Babylonian kingdom. 586 BC. 539 BC, the Medes and the Persians come in and they conquer and they destroy Babylon, and they begin to take over. And the Mede and Persian empire is going to grow from about 539 BC till about 331 BC, when Alexander the Great comes in and his kingdom conquers the Medes and the Persians. Read through history books, and most historians are going to tell you that the Medo-Persian Empire, geographically speaking, is the greatest empire that ever existed. And so this says, don't forget, this is King Xerxes. Xerxes is the third ruler of the of the Persian Empire. Cyrus was first, his son Darius was second, and then Xerxes is the third. We understand that Xerxes also from history ruled from about 486 to about 465 BC. And then we see this in Esther. So it gives you this picture. This is this huge kingdom. It extends. Google sometime the Persian kingdom, and you see Xerxes. Some of you know Xerxes from the movie 300, right? Xerxes and his taking his people and conquering. How dare you, Tim, talk about a movie that had gratuitous sex scenes and all that bloody violence? Well, I know some of you didn't know. That's okay. It's there, and it talks about Xerxes. And so it says, at that time Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the 3rd year of his reign. So we know this is 483 BC. The book of Esther is going to take place over a course of 10 years, 483 BC to 473 BC, and it's in the 3rd year. Check out what happens in the 3rd year of Xerxes' reign. He reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet, a party, for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. So all the military leaders, all the advisors, all the legal people, they're there, they're having this party, and this is quite a party. Verse 4, for a full 180 days. This is a 6-month party. For 6 months, this guy throws a party. Why? Because he wants to display the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. He's like, I want everybody to know how powerful I am. I want everybody to know how important I am. And it's going to take me 6 months so they can experience everything that talks about me and my power and my greatness. When these days were over, 180 days, 6-month party were over. By the way, any of you partied for 180 days? I know some of you probably, you through that party your freshman year in college, and it lasted for most of the semester, and you weren't invited to go back to college the next semester. But anyway, this is a 180-day party. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 more days. So 180-day party wasn't enough. He's going to have another week, another 7 days. And look what he invites. It's in the enclosed garden of the king's palace. For all the people, from the least to the greatest, were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen fastened to the cords with white linen and purple material, to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other. The royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink with no restrictions, for the king instructed all the wine servers, serve each man what he wants. And there's this party. In 180 days, he displayed it to the powerful people. And for 7 days, he said, I want everybody, the least to the greatest, to come in, and I want you to experience my world, the world in which I live. And it makes Trump's palaces and Trump's places look like Kmart. It's just beautiful, and it's gorgeous, and people are captivated by the power of King Xerxes. And he's having this party. Queen Vashti, there's a queen, and her name's Vashti. She also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. You know what it's saying, right? She gave a party for the women of the palace. Yes, that's the maids and the maidservants and all the girls who cook and all the girls who clean. But she's also given a party for every woman in the palace that sleeps with the king. For all the young virgins that are waiting to sleep with the king, for all the concubines who have slept with the king, for all the women in the palace, she's throwing a party, even for those women who sleep with the king, because the king chooses who he wants to sleep with every night. And she gives a party for all of them. On the 7th day, so this guy's been partying for 187 days, when King Xerxes, check this out, was high in spirits from the wine. Let's pause for a minute. He's drunk. He's drunk. When people tell me, hey, Tim, the wine in the Bible is non-alcoholic, this is where I take them. This guy's drunk after 187 days of drinking. It says he's high in spirits from the wine. And I don't know about your experience, but my experience has been most people who are drunk don't make very good decisions. And we're going to see all throughout chapter 1 some not so good decisions were made. So on the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and to the nobles, for she was lovely to look at. Most scholars are going to agree that what the king wants, he said to the eunuchs who take care of the women, the only guys in the palace he can trust, he said, hey, go take care of the queen, and tell the queen I want her to come dance for me, wearing her crown and nothing else. I want the queen to come dance naked for me and my buddies, but have her put her crown on so they remember she's mine. Not a good idea. It's just a guy who's on a 187-day binger just has made a dumb decision. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come dance. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Now he's not just drunk, he's drunk and mad. Drunk people usually don't make wise decisions. Drunk and angry people usually make stupid decisions. Friends, I can't take you to chapter and verse in the Bible that says don't drink. It's not in there. I can take you to chapter and verse that says don't be drunk with wine. There's no benefit that comes out of that besides any time we allow anything to control our mind and our body other than the Spirit of God, some bad things are going to happen. So the king's mad, he's drunk, he's furious. It says this, so it's customary for the king to consult experts in matters of the law and justice. So he spoke with the wise men who understood the times, and he asked them, according to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti? She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then one of the guys replies in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but against all the nobles and all the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. Have you ever noticed that when God seems far away, when something's not going right in your life, you tend to over-exaggerate exactly how bad the situation is? So this guy says, hey, all the women and all the provinces, I got a hunch that this guy who's giving the king advice is having some trouble with his wife at home. And he wants a solution. Oh, this is my way to put my wife in line. And so he says, for the queen's conduct is going to become known to all the women, so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. Of course, they're not saying to the women, oh yeah, he wanted Queen Vashti to come and dance naked for him and all of us. They're not going to tell that part of the story. This very day, the Persian and the Median women of nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the queen's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord, and we can't have that. So, therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed. And you need to keep this in mind as we go through the book of Esther. And once the king of Persia, Media issues a law, an edict that's signed with his signet ring, it cannot be repealed. It cannot be revoked. It cannot be overturned. He can try to do some other things to make sure it doesn't happen, but once it's law, it's law. And tell her that Vashti is never again to enter into the presence of the king. Also let the king give her royal position to someone else who's better than she is. Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all his vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands from the least to the greatest. And all the women that are listening right now said, that's just ludicrous. You want me to respect my husband who's been out on a 187-day binger, and you're going to make a law that says I have to do it. Yeah, that's going to work. That's really what's going to get me in line. So the king and his nobles were pleased with this advice. Really? Now that sounds like a good plan. Yeah, let's do that. So the king did as was proposed and sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province as its own script, and to each people in their own language, proclaiming that every man should be the ruler over his own household, using his own native tongue. Tell your life to get in line because the king said so. That's just a recipe for disaster. And chapter 1's given to us to set the context. It gives us the historical context. It lets us know kind of the geopolitical things of what are going on. It lets us know the situation, and it lets us know some of the main characters in this amazing but not very pretty story. But it's also written to let us know one other thing, and it's this: that earthly power is just an illusion. That underneath all the gold couches, that underneath all the silver trappings, underneath all the gold goblets, underneath all the wine that flows liberally, earthly power is nothing but an illusion, because it's God and God alone who changes the heart of the king. It's God and God alone who, even though you might not see him, even though he seems far away, that God is taking every detail and he wants to use it for his glory and for our good. And he's wanting to draw us to himself, and we just see, and people get an insight. Good grief, this is the king who's responsible for the greatest geographical empire in history, and for half a year, he's drunk. And when he's got a decision to make, he calls on guys who've been drinking with him for 6 months. It's just an illusion. And we see God, even though he seems far away, his hand is everywhere present. And so in this story, as we continue to go through this party, we see three categories of people when it comes to following God, because it boils down to this: even when God seems far away, our responsibility is to say, He's God, He's good, and I'll trust Him. The scriptures say, you are God and what you do is good. And my responsibility, am I going to choose to trust Him or not? So even when God seems far away, I'll still trust Him. But before trusting Him, some of us kind of put some caveats on that. Some of us kind of say, not quite yet. And we see this in the story of Esther. And the first one comes in chapter 2. Later, when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. And you know what's going on here, right? The king's upset because he's never going to have sex with her again. She's the most beautiful woman in all the world, and he's like, doggone it, what did I do while I was drunk and while I was angry? I sent her away, and I issued a decree, and she can never come back into my presence again. I can't have sex with her. Man, was that stupid. So the king's personal attendants know what's going on, so they propose a plan. Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm. How many provinces? 127. To bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who's in charge of all the women. Because again, the only guy the king trusts to be in charge of the women is the eunuch. And let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young women who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it, and all of the people said, yeah, duh, of course he did. Here's the plan. Hey, king, we know you don't get to have sex with Vashti again. We got a solution for you. Go to all 127 provinces, find the hottest, best-looking young virgin, bring her back to the palace, have sex with her instead. Not just her, but all 127 of them. Friends, I need to pause here and say this. There's some teachings out there right now, very popular teachings, that are making light of this and saying, hey, this is like the first episode of The Bachelor. This is not. This is not, friends. This is sex trafficking. This is the most powerful man on the planet saying, I want you and the other 126 of you, and you're going to come to my palace, whether you like it. This is not free women choosing with a free mind to go and see whether or not they get a rose. This is sex trafficking. And these 126 young virgins, 127 young virgins, most likely 13, 14, maybe 15 years old, are brought to the palace. They're going to undergo a year's worth of beauty treatments. And at the end of the year, there's going to come a knock on their door. Tonight's your night. You're going in to see the king. And they're going to go into his bedchamber, and you know what's going to happen. I apologize for the graphic language. He's going to rape her. This is not consensual sex. He's going to rape her. He's going to have his way with her. And when he's done with her, he's going to send her out. And no longer does she get the year's worth of beauty treatments. Now she goes to another part of the palace where she's nothing more than a concubine. And if, by chance, the king happens to remember her name and she was good enough in bed, he'll call for her to come back. But probably not, because there are 125 more waiting. Friends, where's God in that? God seems like he's really far away in that. What do you do when God seems so far away? So Esther's night comes. By the way, I need to say this. Esther's given name is Hadassah. And one of my pet peeves is that we recognize people not by their God-given name, but by the name that somebody else gives them. I've shared this with you before when we preached through Daniel. We don't know Daniel's buddies by their given names. We know them by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were the names given to them by a pagan king. Esther is the name given to her by a pagan king. Esther means star. And she was kind of the star of the harem. She was the one who found favor with the eunuch. She got the greatest place in all of the harem. She got 7 handmaids to take care of her. She got the greatest food. She was the star of the harem. But friends, she was still in a harem. Not by her own choice. Her name Hadassah, her God-given name, it means myrtle. It means fragrant one. By the way, the rabbis are going to tell us that the Persian name Esther rhymes with a Hebrew word that means hidden. And so when they come to celebrate the Feast of Purim, people wear masks, like Mardi Gras masks, kind of on a stick, and they put it up as a reminder that sometimes God is hidden right there in your midst, in the least likely of all the people. And it's this amazing thing. And so this is a story, and it's ugly, and it doesn't seem to get much better, because now it was her night with the king, and the king was pleased, and he's like, this is the one, and he gives her the crown, and he sends her away, and he throws another party. It's a party we'll take a look at in the next couple of weeks. This big party for Esther, the new queen. But as the story begins to unfold, we see that Esther, this 13, 14, 15-year-old little girl, she grew up an orphan. Her mom and dad had died. We don't know when, but she grew up an orphan. Her parents were dead. She was raised by her cousin. His name is Mordecai, who took her in and raised her as his own daughter. And when they got dispersed to the land by the Babylonians, Mordecai, he raised her. And when she's taken to the palace, when she's taken and she's part of the harem, Mordecai stays day and night outside the city gate because he wants to know what's happening to his 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old cousin who he raised as his daughter. And while he's standing by the gate, he overhears that there's a plot to assassinate the king. And he says, I've got to get word to Esther. If I can get Esther, she can put a stop to this. So he gets word to Esther because he's checking on her every single day and night, wanting to make sure she's safe, because this is just not a good break for her. So he gets word to Esther, and Esther gets word to the king, and the plot's investigated. And sure enough, there were two people that were about ready to assassinate the king, and the plot is foiled. And you'd think Mordecai would be the hero, but we're going to find out that he really wasn't, and we're going to see what happens to him in a couple of weeks. But as the story continues, Esther is there. And I just would say this, when it comes to trusting God, he's God, he's good, I will trust him. When it comes to trusting God, some of us fall into this camp. I'll trust you, I'll follow you if. I think that's the story of chapter 2. I'll follow you, I'll trust you if everything goes my way. If. How many people have prayed a prayer like this? God, I'll follow you and I'll do what you want to do. If you get me out of this crisis, if you get me out of this situation, then I'll give my life to you. God, I'll follow you if. I'll follow you if my children are okay. God, I'll follow you if this really isn't cancer. God, I'll follow you if all the breaks go my way. Esther got no breaks. And she's faced with a choice. Am I going to follow God or am I not? Am I going to see his hidden presence around me even when things don't go my way? And I would just ask you, my friends, what's your command on God? See, when we tell God, I'll follow you, I'll trust you if, it's God, if you do something in my way, in my time, exactly the way I want to see it done. And most of us at some point in time say, God, I'll follow you if. And if we tell God, I'll follow you if, you know what we're doing? We're giving him the spiritual middle finger. He's just like, no, I'm God, I'm good, and you're going to trust me even if it doesn't make sense, and there are questions that we wrestle with and we do not understand. But we can't say, God, I'll follow you if. And Esther was faced with that choice. The story continues, chapter 3. We're introduced to a guy, and his name's Haman, and he's one of the king's nobles. Now, we already know from chapter 1 that the king's nobles do not make good decisions. We already know that they're guys who go on 6-month drinking binges, and the noblest of all the nobles, his name's Haman. And he gets great respect from the king, and everybody that sees Haman is supposed to bow down and worship him. Well, Mordecai, who's standing at the city gates because he's wanting to check on Esther, refuses. So every time Haman walks by, everybody else bows down, but Mordecai stays standing up, and Haman gets ticked off. And Haman says, that is unacceptable. Who is this guy? Well, his name's Mordecai. Where does he come from? Well, he's a Jew. And Haman's like, oh, man, I want to kill him. But now that you tell me he's a Jew, I don't want to just kill him. I want to kill all of the Jews that are all over the entire Persian kingdom and all over the world. Which, by the way, can I just hit pause and say, it's fascinating to me that the more things change, the more things stay the same, that there's still one man in that part of the world that wants to execute all the Jews across the planet. The more things change, the more things stay the same. And so Haman says, I want to do this. Hey, king, here's what I'd like to do. I got a plan. There's some people that don't follow your laws. They don't bow down to you. They don't worship you. And they're just being disrespectful. King, there's got to come to an end. What I'd like to do is I'd like to put all kinds of money into the king's treasury. And after I do that, king, would you let me just come up with a plan to kill them all? And the king's like, there are really people who don't worship me and bow down about me and don't follow my laws? Yep, king, that's right. Forget the money, keep the money for yourself. Here's my signet ring, here's the law, signed, sealed with my signet ring. Go kill all the Jews. Where's God in that? His people are about ready to be executed. And where's God in that? And Mordecai hears of the plan, and he sees the thing that is written out in the edict that's been given. He's like, oh, this worked before. I need to get word to Esther. And if Esther can get word to the king, then maybe we can stop this. Maybe we can do this before things go too far. And you get to chapter 4, and this has gone back and forth, and as Mordecai is out in front, just in sackcloth and ashes, and Esther sees it. What's wrong with Mordecai? She sends word. Somebody comes back, tells Esther, hey, Mordecai wants you to know that there's this plot to kill all the Jews, and he thinks you should do something about it. So Esther sends word back to Mordecai. She says, this is what I want you to tell Mordecai. All the king's officials and all the people of royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they should be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to the king. The second group of people that when it comes to following God, when it seems far away, the first group says, I'll follow God if. The next group says, I'll follow God but. Hey, Esther, you can do something about this. He says, I know there's a plot to kill all your people, but life's pretty good for me right now. You know what she's saying? It's been 30 days since I've been called into the king. It's been 30 days since I've been raped. Life's pretty good for me right now. The girls are coming over at 10:30 for brunch. We got mani-pedis at 2. We're taking a walk on the palace grounds through the palace gardens at 5. There's a party for me tonight at 5:30. Everything's going really good for me right now. No, thank you. I'll follow God. I'll trust God, but don't ask anything extra of me. And I wonder how many of us are in the same category. Hey, I know there's a plot out there to kill all of God's people. Jesus said it this way, the enemy, the thief, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Our enemy's number one job is to keep us from going to heaven, to keep us from beginning a relationship with God through faith and trust in Jesus so that we will spend eternity separated from God in this place called hell. That's his number one job. He doesn't hide from it. He doesn't pretend. He's come to kill all of the people that God's created and keep them separated from God. There's a plot out for all of God's people, and I wonder how many of us to say, yeah, I know that. But life's pretty good for me right now. Hey, the job's good. I'm waiting on that next promotion, and I don't want to rock the boat. Hey, life's pretty good for me right now. I'm living in the American dream, and that's pretty good, which, by the way, gets in conflict with the Jesus way all the time. I'll follow you, but don't ask anything extra of me because I don't want to rock the boat. Or maybe I need to put it this way. There was an execution order given by Haman to kill all the Jews across the world. The enemy is given an execution order. Let's kill all God's people across the world before they can say yes. Let's make it a little more specific. In the cultural Miami Valley, that's the term that the media outlets use, the radio stations, the news outlets, the cultural Miami Valley. All kinds of ways to describe the Miami Valley, but the cultural Miami Valley is composed of about 1.9 million people. According to the Association of Religious Database, which is one of the most respected research organizations out there, of those 1.9 million people, 58.5% of them say, there is no God, I don't want to have a relationship with God, making it about 1.1 million people in our valley that say, I don't want to have anything to do with God. And friends, there's an execution order that's been issued on them. Kill them. Keep them separated from God. And we know it. And we're like, yeah, but life's pretty good for me right now. I don't need to worry about that. Let's make it a little more understandable maybe. In Montgomery County, the county where our facility is, by the statistics, about 535,000 people. The religious database shows us about 51.5%, or about 275,000 people say there is no God and I don't want to have a relationship with God. That's your neighbor, that's my neighbor, that's people who have an execution order issued on their head. And we say, God, I'll follow you, but don't ask anything of me. I wonder how many of us are more familiar with the Buckeye statistics and that statistic that there are that many lost people living in our midst. I wonder how many of us this last year were more concerned about our yard than the lost friend that we have that's going to hell if something happens to them tonight. Let's just not pick on those people. Let me pick on some church people. I wonder if Esther said something like this: "Hey, Mordecai, I know that there's an execution order out on all of God's people, and as soon as the girls leave tonight, there's another group of girls coming in, and we're having a Bible study on predestination, whether or not they've been predestined to die without Jesus. We're going to have that Bible study." I wonder how many of us said, "I need one more Bible study this next year. And if I could just understand everything there is to understand about salvation and heaven and hell, then maybe all..." No, friends, it doesn't work that way. You know everything you need to know in order to share your faith. The blind man simply put it one day: "Once I was blind, now I see." You know what's happened in your life. And I wonder how many of us say, "Don't ask anything else of me." How tragic. I'll follow you I'll follow you, but I'll trust you. And then there's a final thing. This is maybe the part of Esther you're familiar with. Esther sends that word back to Mordecai. And the scriptures say this: when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish." Esther, what makes you think you're going to escape the kill order? What makes you think that you're not going to be killed? You're going to be killed too, not just you, but all your father's family. If you choose to say, "I'll follow you, but don't rock the boat, don't ask anything extra of me." So Esther sent a message back to Mordecai and said this: "Go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. I will follow you no matter what." No matter what. Finally, Esther says, "Hey, I get it. Following is going to cost me something, and I'm willing to pay the price." Because you know what? She knew the story of Queen Vashti. She knew what happened to the last queen that didn't please the king. She's no longer around. The king's moved on. And Esther's like, he can move on with me too, but if that's what it cost me, that's what it cost me, because it's the right thing to do. If I perish, I perish. I will follow you, God. I will trust you no matter what. Friends, this is what I believe. I believe that God has you at this moment right where you need to be. And that wherever you're at, you need to follow him, not if, not but no matter what. He's placed you in your neighborhood. He's placed you in your workplace. He's placed you in your school. He's placed you in your community. He's placed you everywhere you are because he's got something that he wants to do through ordinary little old you. And he wants to use you in an extraordinary way. Isn't it fascinating? You know, where's God in this? You see God's hand in all of this. You see God hidden right in their midst. You see that God used a pagan queen to set all of this in motion when she said, "No, I won't dance nude for you." And it set all this in motion. And God used advisors who gave really bad advice to set a plan in place that would get Esther to where she needed to be. And God used a eunuch. God used a eunuch to give Esther special favor, special treatment. God's hand is doing everything he can to draw you to himself for his glory and for your good. And I know some of it doesn't make sense, but I just want to remind you the challenge is, will you follow, will you trust no matter what? Even when it costs you something. Friends, Esther was faced with the same decision. Not where's God, but where am I? His kingdom or my comfort? Will I step up? Will I speak out? And the more things change, the more they stay the same. One of the words I really don't like is the word coincidence. I just don't think there are any. Because I think our God is bigger than coincidence. And it is not a coincidence that these horrific things, as they happened, put together the opportunity to save God's people. And we're going to see that part of the story as we continue over the next couple of weeks. But for today, Or are you at the place where I'll follow you if God fix this for me, then I'll follow you. God, I'll follow you, but don't ask anything extra of me. Or are you really ready today to say, God, I will follow you no matter what? Almighty God, thank you for meeting us in this moment, for meeting us in this place. Thank you that when you seem incredibly far away, you haven't moved. You promised to move ahead of us, you promised to move alongside of us, and you promised to come after us. God, you've placed us here, and you want us to follow you no matter what. And it's going to cost us something. So God, we just do business with you today and say, not if, not but. And God, we say we're no longer going to give you the spiritual middle finger. You've gotten our attention. And we can't just say we love you, we need to live like it. So Father, do what only you can do. God, for the one today who would maybe for the first time understand that there's a price on their head. Their enemy wants to kill them and keep them separated from God for eternity. God, maybe today for the first time they'd call out to you, God, I don't understand it all. But I confess Jesus is my Lord. I believe that you raised him from the dead, and I believe that he has the power, and he's the only one who can forgive my sin. Come into my life, Lord Jesus. Take away my sin. I want to follow you. Father, for the rest of us that need to do business with you, God, you've called us, and we know what you want us to do, and we simply say yes no matter what. In Jesus' name I pray. Friend, if you'd fill out your response card, if you're watching online, if you'd let us know how God's moved you today, how he wants you to respond, you do that and let us know. For those of you that are in our local venue, would you stand with me for a word of blessing and benediction? Chris is going to be down front. He'd love to talk with you, pray with you. He'd love to introduce you to Jesus. He'd love to pray with you over anything that you want to pray with him about God's direction for your life. Father, thank you again for this moment. Thank you that there are no coincidences. Thank you that you have brought us here to this place, and we say we'll follow you no matter what. God, you move ahead of us, you come alongside of us, and you will come after us. And God, I know that your hand of blessing rests on us, for you will never leave us and you will never forsake us. So God, may we know your presence and your power this week. God, in the ordinary things that we do this week, you're going to do extraordinary things. We love you. Now, friends, as you go from this place, from behind a mobile device or television screen, may you know the hand of God's blessing rests on you. And may you sense his presence ahead of you, alongside of you, and coming after you to accomplish an extraordinary thing. Should Jesus not come back before next week, I look forward to seeing you here as we continue through the book of Esther. God bless you. I love you. We'll see you next week.